news for us immigrants here in the U.S., and that has something to do with the USCIS memo that was released on November 7th. Let's break it down here on American Dream.
This American Dream segment is brought to you by Aquino & Lowe Law Firm, answering your immigration questions.
Attorney Richard Lowe is joining us on the show from Aquino & Lowe Law Firm. Hello and welcome back to Kababayan LA.
Hello, good to be here.
So this is good news. I'm happy, but let's break it down. What does it mean for us? First of all, the memo released on November 7th. What is it about?
Well, the memo is basically a guidance for USCIS as to how they're going to issue notices to appear. That is, how they are going to initiate the removal process for individuals.
And for people that don't quite understand, removal proceedings or removal process is the same as deportation.
Right. It's the same as deportation. It was just named something else in 1996.
Okay. When you're about to get into a removal proceeding, which means your status here is in jeopardy, or
yes.
Then you get this NTA, which is notice to appear.
That's correct.
And how was it like before?
Well, before, basically, USCIS, after the completion of an adjudication of an adjustment of status application, let's say, if you were denied for whatever reason, you were automatically given a notice to appear, and you had to go and present your case before an immigration judge. This presented quite a bit of a burden for a lot of people because if they had not filed the proper affidavit of support, for example, they ended up in court,
right,
and that's
exactly.
a very expensive and difficult procedure to be in court.
Okay.
So this memo seems to turn that around a little bit.
In saying that?
Well, prior to there was a 2006 memo issued in which this started all the NTA after adjustment situation, and basically we're returning back to that time previously in some respects where it's not automatic that once a case is denied, you're going to get an NTA issued. Mm-hmm. Now there's going to be some considerations based on the type of case that it is. And I think this goes together with the prosecutorial discretion memo that came out earlier, where the administration is sort of pulling back on who they're going to bring the hammer down on immigration matters.
So they are being a little bit more lenient. And now when you're talking about bringing the hammer down, they are putting an emphasis, though, on fraud cases, and particularly criminal cases. When you talk about fraud cases, can you give us examples of that?
Well, the typical fraud case in an adjustment situation would be somebody perhaps who entered into the United States fraudulently, that is, who they used a fake passport or visa to enter, or somebody who perhaps they believe entered into a marriage in order to gain an immigration benefit.
Or somebody who lied. Say, for example, we were talking about this with Allison the last time around. If you were petitioned by your parents as a single adult over 21 and you get married while waiting in the Philippines, and then you lie saying that you're still single or something like that, is that something that?
Yes, that's it. That's in a naturalization context. The memo does deal with naturalizations a little bit differently than it does with adjustment, but that is a consideration, that if you entered the United States fraudulently, they are going to look at that. But even in that case now, there's a little bit of a pullback in that it's not going to be an automatic issuance of an NTA now that they're setting up this kind of a remand, this kind of a board that's going to look at these things and then make a decision rather than just the individual officer making a decision. There's actually going to be a group that's designated in each district office that will be taking care of determining whether or not an NTA should be issued in that instance.
Yes, so fraud cases and criminal cases. When you talk about criminal cases, what are those?
Well, the criminal cases, basically, they've split up into egregious public safety concern cases and non-egregious public safety concern cases. And the public safety concern cases you can imagine are the murder, rape, child pornography, known or suspected gang members dealing in firearms, those kinds of things.
Drugs?
If there are trafficking, I believe, and if there's violence involved, yes. So these are really things that are concerning public safety. So if that's an issue, then these cases will be referred to ICE without adjudication of the application. So in a situation where you are filing for adjustment of status, let's say, and you have committed one of these crimes, whereas before you may have gotten the ability to argue with the officer that this shouldn't apply to you, that you have a waiver, whatever, right now they're going to say, we're going to refer this over to ICE for them to determine whether or not there's an NTA to be issued, and then we will hold off on making an adjudication. So slightly different process, and I think more likely in those cases that you would receive an NTA without even having an adjudication of your application.
So let's talk about NTA. When you get an NTA, you need to appear. What happens if you don't?
Well, if you don't appear, obviously you get an order of removal issued against you. You get a warrant for your arrest issued for you.
And if you start just hiding, moving away, how can they trace you?
Well, right now, immigration is starting to use a lot of electronic methods. That is, looking over records, getting things off the internet,
Right.
using background checks, those kinds of things where your Social Security number pops up. And so the instances in which the Immigration Service is able to locate people who have even done simple things as overstay
Right.
has really increased, so that the likelihood of them finding you, if they have the resources to do it, is a lot higher than I think it used to be.
So every other week here on the show, twice a month, we talk about this, and it just gives me the sense all the time that immigration is very tricky. It changes a lot, different memos, different laws, and it's just very, sometimes even without enough notice, right?
Yes.
And so I think that's why it's important to have an immigration lawyer help you go through your case, go through your documents, and make sure that everything is filed correctly,
Yes.
and that you have the best options. And so Aquino & Low Law Firm, they give consultation. That's the number to call on the screen. Make your appointment right now. Thank you so much, and more power to you.
Thank you.
We'll be back more in Kababayan LA. Don't go away.